Have you ever wondered about the logistics of actually buying locally sourced food? How does it affect flavor, the taste? How does it even happen that you as a business owner can afford to do this? We're going to discuss this today on the Food Explorer podcast. Welcome everyone, I'm Colleen and I am your host for the Food Explorer podcast, and I thought it would be really fun this week to actually look at sourcing food locally and using it in events or even in your recipes. If you own a kitchen, you are a home cook making amazing meals for your friends and family or just yourself. A lot of times I hear a few objections. Well, I own this restaurant and I can't buy local. I can't source local because I need X product in X amount at all times. I have to have these Roma tomatoes all year long. And oh my gosh, if I don't have them, I can't run my restaurant. And it's a big mindset shift that we have to think about, where we look at the product that is seasonally available and what that means. Well, first thing that it means is if you're buying something that's seasonal in season, usually the costs are less because the product is the freshest and most abundant at that time of the year. The other thing that always is interesting is, why can't we start to switch our menus, how we consume and enjoy food, to more seasonal? We're going to discuss this in a lot more depth in upcoming episodes, but what I wanted to do in this episode is just start to set the seeds of how to start small, buying local, and move up from there. And the reason I want to do this right now is I'm actually, with my chocolate business, hosting a series of events called the Harvest Tasting Events. What I decided for this year was I was just going to do 2 events. When I originally thought about it, I thought, I'll do 3, 4, 5 events, but it really wasn't feasible because I wanted to buy fresh ingredients from the local farmers markets, and I wanted them to be in season, of the moment, and what basically we should be eating right now. So the fun challenge was I actually started planning the menus out quite a while ago. I looked around at different farmers markets around Alberta because with my business, I end up going to a lot of farmers markets to visit friends and vendors and, just kind of yap for hours on end and talk with other people about what's happening in their lives and how their business is going and see what ingredients I might want. So with this event, it was really interesting because what I ended up doing was I found ingredients from the mountain farmers markets that we go to. So those are the ones in Banff and Canmore, Alberta. And then I went to a couple of the farmers markets in Edmonton, and I saw the ingredients that were available. I started to piece together in my mind what I wanted this harvest-themed tasting menu to consist of. And then, basically, 1 week before the first event, I purchased all of the fresh ingredients. And I gotta say, it was so much fun. I had my master list with sort of my dream menu. These are the things, if I could get all these items, I would be so happy. And then when I got to the farmers markets, I started looking around to see, what do I actually want? So the menu that I designed was a lot of fun. I gotta say, we had our first harvest event last weekend, and it was joyful. There's no word that better describes it than joyful. I had 6 incredible ladies here at our new tasting room, and we sat down and I said to them, I want to talk tonight as we eat and enjoy this chocolate. I want to talk about why I sourced the ingredients I did, how the menu changed from what I originally thought it was going to be, and why I put the chocolates together the way that I did. Because this is something that I don't really get to talk a lot about, but a lot of thought goes into when you're going to enjoy this delectable treat. How is it going to be texture, flavor, aroma, all of the mouthfeel, everything about it? How is it going to actually be enjoyed by you? And they were very keen for this. These are the ladies that were here last week are some of my most regular customers, and I absolutely adore them. And they booked the whole event out for just their group. And so we had just an amazing evening. And I always laugh because I say, these events are going to be about an hour long. And, 2.5 hours later, we're just wrapping up. But I got a chance to really deep dive into some of the things. So what the menu originally was going to be was pumpkins, berries, apples of some variety, and peaches. That's what I originally wanted. And in my, not procrastination, we're not going to call it procrastination, but in my desire to buy as close to the event as possible, well, I missed peach season. Let's just be honest here. I missed peach season. But what I ended up getting was something incredible. So as I shopped around the farmer's market, realizing, woe is me, I have missed peach season, my boyfriend Jason says, look at this product here. So one of the vendors at the Bountiful Farmers Market, which is a 3-day market that happens in Edmonton, had organic peach apple juice. Oh, what is this? I had never seen this before. I had always kind of glanced at their booth, but I had never really bought anything, partly because I don't really like apples very much. Now, I'm gonna put a little caveat on that. I don't like just a fresh, eat off the tree apple. Call me weird. They give me a stomach ache, and I don't know why. But a stewed apple, an apple in a pie, an apple in a turnover, sign me up. Apple fritters, those are my love language. But just a plain old fresh apple, it's not for me. So I saw this juice at a booth that we'd never actually bought from before. So that was super lovely. And so in my head, I started reformulating. Okay, I can't do fresh peaches like I want, but this juice is fresh pressed from the peaches that were literally on their booth 2 weeks ago. So I got that. And then as I was searching around, I realized, wait a second, there is Mama G's jams. So I went over to her booth, and lo and behold, she had fresh made peach jam with chunks of peaches in it. So I felt like somebody was looking down on me and said, you shall have peaches. So I got those two things and I started formulating, okay, what am I going to put the peaches with? How am I going to do it? So I ended up getting the peaches. And I'm just going to go through a couple of the ingredients and how I changed them before I actually talk specifically about the menu. The next thing was I had envisioned getting a beautiful pumpkin, and I was going to make a fresh pumpkin pie type filling and do like a deconstructed pumpkin pie with chocolate components. And I had gone to a booth at the downtown farmers market in Edmonton that's opened 2 days a week. And they had all these pumpkins, of course, it's pumpkin season, but then they had all these different types of squash. And there was one squash that I had never seen before. I didn't know anything about it. So I picked it up. It was a very tiny little squash, weighed a couple pounds. And I said to the ladies, what the heck is this? I don't know what this is. And they said, oh, that's a red curry, Kuri squash. I said, what does it taste like? And they said it was kind of nutty and sweet. I thought, well, this is way better than a pumpkin. So I bought that. So I did have to substitute out those two things. I was able to get the berries that I wanted from Steve and Dan's, which is a fruit vendor. They're out of BC, and they are also a Bountiful Market. And I was able to get from Steve and Dan's as well, Honeycrisp apples. These apples are delightful. They're very crisp. They're very bright. They have a beautiful crunch to them and sweetness. So I ended up with the 4 components that I originally planned, but just in a little bit different form for the peaches and the pumpkin, and ending up being a squash, basically. So I brought it all home and I started looking at all the components that I wanted to put into these different things. So you're probably thinking right now, I thought, Colleen, you were going to talk about sourcing local and how to, incorporate it into like your business or your restaurant. I am. This is a small scale. So running a tiny business like I do, for many people that run, restaurants or chain restaurants or anything like that, as I was saying at the beginning, the thought is, well, I can't incorporate a local item because I can't get the volume that I want. I need this romaine lettuce and I need, 100 heads of them a week. And a small farmer can't produce that for me. But isn't the fun and the beauty in finding a smaller farmer or producer and buying that in-season item and then figuring out what to do with this? Now, and I get it, some of you out there that own big restaurants are like, that's not feasible. I need to keep my food costs on, this level. I can't introduce things that my staff won't know how to deal with. I don't want weird ingredients where we have to come up with new ways to prepare them. It's going to put a strain. I understand all those things. But if there is an opportunity to use a local ingredient or a local item, even just starting with something small, start getting microgreens, start getting, herbs. There's no reason that you couldn't actually grow some herbs in your facility. They don't take up much space. They take a little pot, fresh basil, fresh mint, rosemary, anything like that. So when I thought about this harvest event, my goal was as many local ingredients as possible because, let's be honest, I live in Canada. Chocolate is not local. So that's why I'm always thinking about what can I include into the chocolate to bring in all these local elements. I was actually pretty chuffed by the time I got to the end and I came up with the whole menu. So I wanted to be clever. I'm not super clever, and I am terrible with naming things. You're going to learn this about me as we spend more time together. So, my chocolate bar that has coffee in it is called Coffee. My chocolate bar that has Malden flake salt in it from the Evolution store is called Dark and Salty. I'm not creative with names. I'm terrible. So I was sitting and I was trying to think, how to be cutesy and clever in the menu. And so peaches come from trees and apples come from trees and the squash comes from the ground. So I was like, okay, well, trees is the category and earth is the category. But then I was thinking of the berries and I thought, okay, well, blueberry bush, raspberry bush. Yeah, I'm not calling it bush. That's weird and awkward. So I ended up calling it orchard, which is also really not correct, but it sounded better than bush. And then one of my students yesterday said you should have called it shrub. That's also a bit weird, but it would have been better than bush and more accurate than orchard. But in my goal to be clever, the menu said tree and then peach, orchard, the blueberry, the raspberry, tree, apple, and earth squash. And so I created this journey going through the flavors. And whenever I'm putting together a tasting event, it is a journey. I want you to feel like at the end of the event, you're not stuffed to the gills where you think, I will never eat again. I also don't want you to feel like each item is too sweet or too rich or the texture is too challenging to deal with. So I'm always thinking about these things. When I actually started putting together each of the items, it was really fun because I was able to source a local, heavy 35% whipping cream from a brand new dairy that I haven't done any procurement from before, and it is called Rock Ridge Dairy, and they're out of Ponoka, very close to where I live. So I was able to use that. And then I actually got some pumpkin spiced pecans. And I sourced those from a small company out of Sherwood Park called Nuts About You. So every single thing on the menu had 3 to 6 components from a local producer. And the goal was to go on this journey of the season that is right now and experience it. And as I said earlier, the event was joyful. We had a really cool mix of textures within each dessert that we had. They really were desserts. They weren't like little truffles. Like, these were bigger pieces of dessert, but not in a way that, again, you felt like, oh boy, I'm leaving here so full. I feel terrible. Like, I don't like that. I want people to feel like they're satisfied, their cravings are taken care of, and they're thinking about, when can I have something like this again? The other thing that I do is I actually make all of the items for tasting events the day of or the day before. So these are super fresh. And it's always so interesting when people come to these events. And I do a lot of events throughout the year. We probably do close to 20 events a year for all sorts of different things. But when people taste something that's been made like that day or even just the day before, their reaction is always, wow, this is what fresh tastes like. Many companies, they make stuff months and months in advance, or they make things and they store it and then they unfreeze it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you've got to do what you've got to do for your business. But for us and the tasting events, it's kind of almost like one of our selling points. I'm not making your ingredients and putting them into these fancy, pretty desserts, but I made them like 3 months ago. They're getting made fresh right before the events. So that's kind of a fun and different thing. The other thing that I just want to cover really quick is everything that I put on this menu, I actually started shooting some videos of it. So it's really interesting that the menu that I had, and I had a big master sheet that I show in the video, and I had everything planned out. But as I started making things and as I started putting the components together, I was like, oh, you know what? I was going to put the pecans with the apple component dessert, but the pecans actually are going to go better with the peach. And the apples I'm actually going to make granola for, and that's going to be the textural, crunchy component. So I did a lot of different things. The apples originally, I was going to kind of stew them almost down to an applesauce. And instead I decided that they would be better served almost like, to use a pasta term, al dente. So I kept the skin on the apples and I stewed them only to the point where they were soft, but they still had that sort of crisp crunch in the middle. And I did them with different spices and a little bit of brown sugar. Not a lot, though. I used very little because the sort of chocolate mousse that I put it in was that sweet component. And then the chocolate, we'll call it a boat. I made like a chocolate boat. I put the apples in there. So I had different crunchy textural components, and I wanted the apples to be one of them. I didn't want them to be that sort of to the point of applesauce. There was a lot of really fun things that we did for the event. And like I said, I've started shooting some YouTube videos, and I'm going to get those produced after we do the second event this week, because it will be the recap of what I ended up changing. My original thoughts and goals, and then what I ended up changing. So with that, like I said, I don't want to keep this a very long episode, but I wanted to start the conversation of how do we incorporate local ingredients into what we're doing. And honestly, with an event like this, I'm going all out on the local ingredients because I can. It's not a hard thing to do when you have a group of people that are coming specifically for a themed tasting event, and they know exactly the theme they're coming for, and I can plan out the menu based on that theme, and I can source everything that's included with the chocolate, and it's a local ingredient. So it's a bit different than obviously planning out menus and stuff for restaurants, but I do really want to encourage, and I got thinking about this today because I'm teaching a hospitality course right now, and we just did a whole section on restaurants. And as we were going through the restaurants, we started talking about, how to chain restaurants encourage people to buy from them when they're not in their country of origin, right? How does McDonald's encourage you to buy McDonald's in Japan, in Mexico, in all these different countries? Well, they incorporate regional tastes and flavors into what they're doing, get you in, and then you're buying your Big Mac, right? But I think we really need to start thinking about as local as possible, because we honestly can't keep on with these giant monocultures, big agriculture. We just can't. And we do have enough amazing producers right where we live that can supply us with incredible ingredients. I actually went to a book event last week, and it was for a brand new cookbook that just came out called Prairie. And it's by Dan Clapson and Twyla Campbell. So both of these amazing people are food writers, writing for different places like the CBC, different food and wine publications. And one of the things they talked about was having a cookbook that celebrates the prairies, celebrate all the amazing ingredients that we have on the prairies. And they hadn't really seen anything like that before. And the cookbook is absolutely stunning and it's beautiful. And it really, from there, it got me thinking about, okay, what kind of things do we have on the prairie that are amazing? Well, oats. So the oats that I had in the dessert, I made a granola. I asked the guests, would you buy this granola? And they're like, give me a bucket of this granola. And, the granola was done with local oats, a local honey that we just got from an amazing gentleman in Canmore that's got some bees and he's doing honey. And then we had some ingredients that are not from here in the granola, but it was a fun mix. And the granola, I could eat a bucket of it. So I always think about these things when I'm looking at producing and creating menus and experiences for people. Even with our Advent calendar, about 80% of the inclusions in our Advent calendar are from local producers. And that was really important to me. We got the boxes printed in Canada. We have these cornstarch biodegradable grids. So instead of plastic to hold each chocolate inside the box, we have this biodegradable grid. So here in Edmonton, where we're living, you just throw it in your green bin and it biodegrades. It's made of cornstarch. And all of these things are important to us. So I think the conversation, we're going to continue on. We're going to talk a lot more about all of these things, but I wanted to let's start with what's the small thing that we can do? What's the little thing we can add into our menus at home, at the restaurant, wherever we're at, that we can now start to support local, amazing farmers, vendors, producers, and all that. Because on the Food Explorer, we're looking at building community, and that's a big part of what we're doing here. With that, I'm going to end this shorter episode. And of course, please leave some comments. If you have more questions, put them in the comments so that I can start to flesh out and figure out some other items that we can talk about. And of course, if you can subscribe and like and share and comment, do all those things. I know that you hear it from everybody, but it actually does make a big difference. And we're always looking to extend our reach for who is listening to this podcast. Have a great morning, evening, or afternoon, whatever it is that you're doing right now. And I will see you on the next episode of the Food Explorer podcast.